Caleb Widogast was a student at the Sortress Academy who was picked by Trent Ickathon for special training. Ickathon was wildly abusive to his students, embedding residuum crystals into their skin, forcing them to kill prisoners, and even manipulating their memories to make them murder their own parents. Caleb is a character that is very close to my heart. He's a character very much shaped by his trauma and the self-loathing that it created, but it's very different from the way we usually see that explored in RPG characters. He's not really overtly edgy, he's more just melancholic, enduringly sad and filled with honest emotion. There's honestly too many great Caleb moments to even come close to listing all of them, but like with many characters in Critical Role, I think his relationships to other characters like Nod, Jester and Essek are what really make him stand out. Caleb has gone through a lot of suffering, but he also shows that with the right people at your side, you might one day find an opportunity for healing. Jester Lavorre is the daughter of one of the most famous courtesans of the Menagerie Coast, the Ruby of the Sea, and, as is revealed later, of the infamous crime boss known as the Gentleman. Of course, she is also a cleric of the Traveler, a god, that like Jester herself, revels in the spreading of mischief and chaos. Jester is, of course, insanely chaotically fun, but what I like most about Jester is that her character doesn't end there. She also shows some deep care and empathy towards other people, especially towards the rest of the Nine, but not exclusively so. She's just the sunshine the Mighty Nine needed. She contrasts the gloomy Caleb and Yasha with her bright demeanor, her cleric dynamic with Caduceus is great, her romance with Fjord is super cute, and don't even get me started on Chaos Crew. And it doesn't even stop there. Her dynamic with the Traveler is a delight, her relationship with Marion, who by the way also helps humanize sex workers, is heartwarming, and we don't need to talk about the Gentleman. There's just no reason not to love Jester. Mollymauk Tealeaf is the flamboyant blood hunter of the Mighty Nine and a former member of the fledgling and Moondrop Carnival of Curiosities. After waking up one day without any memories of his previous life, he now spends his life in a hedonistic pursuit of the passions without a single care for the person he once was. Mollymauk's demeanor is entirely bright and cheerful, always looking for the next thrill, and that personality clashes extremely well with the creepiness he also carries with him. The fact that he is a blood hunter, that he cuts himself to use blood magic, the weird eyes he has tattooed all over his body, all these things hint very clearly at an unsettling past, and the contrast between these two sides of him just creates such a unique air for him, and at least for me, made him one of the most intriguing mysteries in Campaign 2. That's also one of the reasons why his death hit me so hard. Not just the emotional weight of course, but also the fact that that mystery might remain unsolved. I was wrong though, and we all got to see the horrors that lurked behind that mystery. Fjord is a former sailor who was stranded after his ship was blown up by one of its crewmates and who only escaped from drowning by forming a pact with the mysterious entity known as Uk'otoa. Fjord is shown to be able to keep a cool and rational frame of mind in most situations and also does follow certain moral principles, both things that make him a lot less chaotic than many of the other members of the Nine. Don't get me wrong, he does have his chaotic moments, but because the Nine are such a ball of chaos, I feel like Fjord contrasts the other characters in a way that makes him stand out. The fact that he is often rational and, well, smart is contrasted by the fact that his interactions with Uk'otoa often feel a little clumsy, but that contrast helps establish how manipulative Uk'otoa truly is, how important Fjord's powers are for his self-worth, and through that, how difficult it is for Fjord to interact with his patron. This already makes for a very interesting warlock-patron dynamic, and Fjord finding his faith in the Wild Mother is a perfect conclusion to that arc. Fjord definitely is one of the reasons I like warlocks so much. Caduceus Clay is a cleric of the Wild Mother and a protector of the Blooming Grove, a graveyard threatened by the corruption spreading through the Savalier Wood. I think Caduceus is interesting because he really is a case study in how you can introduce a character into an already ongoing campaign. Taliesin didn't just think about the mechanics extensively, sure he might have seen that the group needed a healer and decided to play a cleric, but I'm mainly talking about personality here. With the Mighty Nine already being such a ball of chaos, Caduceus is exactly the anchor they needed, the group that everyone can turn to when things go sour. And his calm demeanor, his philosophical understanding of religion, of the world, and his place in it, all are so different from the group and yet fit in so well. That's probably also the reason why he's had such an effect on characters like Fjord, who follows his faith in the Wild Mother, or Yasha, who figures out her stance on faith with his help. I think we can all strive to be a little more like Caduceus in our lives. Yasha Nydoorin is a zealot barbarian of the Stormlord who was exiled from her tribe after marrying Zoala, who was not the mate who had been assigned to her by her tribe, and watching her being executed. Throughout the campaign, Yasha learns how to overcome her grief and her trauma, and also finds out about a part of herself that she has forgotten. Yasha, like Pike, kind of has the problem that she has had significantly less screen time than the other characters due to Ashley's frequent absence. I think she may have suffered even more than her because Yasha carries a lot more complexity with her that I feel like didn't really have the time to blossom. However, I think she's a prime example of how a player and a DM can work together to make the best out of such a situation. Yasha being controlled by Oban, for example, was such a strong moment that probably only happened because Ashley was going to be absent. Nevertheless, Yasha's journey toward healing was still incredibly enjoyable to observe, and all of this just makes me happy that Ashley is there more frequently now. Veth Brenatto is a halfling who was cursed and turned into a goblin by a hag, but was later transformed back by a spell made by Caleb and Essek. For me, Veth kind of embodies Sam's amazing talent for making characters that appear primarily as comic relief and have insanely entertaining comedic moments, but still balancing that comedy with character depth and serious emotional roleplay with the other characters. Veth's journey from her self-hate towards her cursed form towards becoming more comfortable with it as even Yeza accepts it, and then eventually regaining her true form is beautiful, and since she shares that journey of overcoming self-hate with him, she also was the perfect character to have a connection to Caleb, and their polar opposite personalities make for an incredibly endearing duo. And somehow her usual fidgety, jumpy, and uncomfortably horny comedic persona doesn't clash with that seriousness in a way that would harm the character, but instead just creates an incomparably unique one. Veth is incredibly special to me, and I think I'm not alone. Beauregard Lionett was kidnapped by the Cobalt Soul after some of their members had been bribed by her father, who thought this a fitting punishment for her disobedience. While she starts as an abrasive, standoffish, and frankly not very likable character, she builds herself from the ground up, learning social skills from Fjord, expanding her knowledge together with Caleb, training to become an expositor with Dairon, and growing to willingly let down her emotional defenses in her romance with Yasha. This turns her not just into a fascinating character, but also into a believable competent expositor of the Cobalt Soul that has a serious chance of changing the Empire for the better. Watching her go through all of that development and learning to help and support the people around her, only to be able to actually get justice herself at the very end by exposing the corrupt Cobalt Soul members that kidnapped her, was also just incredibly satisfying to see. Beau was simply fascinating from start to finish. Shadowhand Essek Thelyss is an influential wizard of the Qin dynasty who conspired with the Cerberus Assembly at the promise of further research into the beacons, and therefore carries a lot of the responsibility for the war between the Empire and the dynasty. He's a cold-hearted traitor who's only interested in himself. Or at least that's true until the Mighty Nein enter his life and he catches feelings. It's very likely that Essek was just planned to be an antagonist in the campaign, but changed drastically because the players took interest in him. In D&D, sometimes that's just how it goes, and Critical Roles shows how much of an opportunity this can be. I love the fact that when Matt realized his players were getting attached to Essek, he didn't just completely change his story or personality and make him good, but instead naturally had him develop from his previous standpoint to a more likable self. This way, the players and their decision had an impact, and they were able to truly make a change in this character and the world. There's a lot to love about a resident levitating hot boy.